Hi, everyone, and welcome to our latest episode of Around the Campfire. I'm Jamie Sonley, Marketing Director at Northwoods, and your Around the Campfire host. I'm very happy to have Katelyn Goerke, our UX Research Lead, and Matt Karge, our WordPress Practice Lead and Business Development Manager, with me today. And we're going to chat all about how to choose a website design and development partner that's right for you, which is always a really hot topic for marketers. But before we dive in, we always begin each episode with a bit of personal trivia about our guests. So today I'm going to ask Matt and Katelyn if they have a favorite inspirational or motivational quote that speaks to them. So we'll start with Matt.
All right. So my father was a very motivational person when I was a kid because he ran his own company and didn't really suffer fools. So his favorite thing to say to me was just figure it out. Figure it out. Just figure it out. So I've taken that with me. It like drove me crazy when I was a kid because my dad wouldn't help me. But what I understand now is that he actually was teaching me to be self-sufficient. So I've taken that into a lot of the things that I do today, where if I've got a problem with WordPress, I just figure it out. And what's crazy is I'm sharing it with my own kids when they're bugging me to help them with something. I say, just figure it out, figure it out. So that is my motivational and inspirational thing that started off as something that drove me crazy and has now become something very integral to my normal life. So,
That's awesome. I like that.
That's
Nice.
great.
That's a good one. Caitlin, how about you?
So I've got a similar story that's inspired by someone in my life, which is very funny. Mine was a mentor in college, and he went by, he had his, normal professor status, but also when he published books and things like that, he always went by the moniker Dr. So What, because his kind of saying that he would say a lot is so what. And for us, it was a signal of, you can say this is the recommendation or this is whatever you're talking to people about, but so what? Why does that thing matter and why is that important? And always like getting people to think critically and think deeper. And that's something that stuck with me basically ever since I took his classes in college, that it kind of has shaped the way that I think about problems, in that it's not just this is the answer, so what? Why does that matter? Or this is the problem, so what? And just is a nice way of, making sure you're always thinking critically and thinking through problems the right way. So, yeah. I have a
That's
pencil
great.
somewhere that says Dr. So What on it, so it helps you remember that way too.
That is awesome. I love that you guys shared inspiration from people in your lives, not just kind of, your typical quotes of, from Dr. Martin Luther King or John F. Kennedy or, those types of quotes. I love that you picked ones that are directly related to your lives. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing those. So. All right, so let's jump into talking about choosing a website design and development partner. So we all know that choosing or moving forward with a website is a very high stakes project for a marketer. Their success, the overall success of their marketing really depends on their website. It's usually also a fairly expensive endeavor with lots of stakeholders throughout the organization that they need to involve and make sure are happy with the project. And so it tends to get a lot of visibility as well, which leads to the need for marketers to ensure that they choose a partner who can really effectively guide them through the process, create that peace of mind that every detail is covered, nothing slips through the cracks, and really acting as their kind of trusted advisor throughout the entire project. So that really means that asking the right questions to potential vendors up front becomes so critically important. So I'm wondering if you guys could share what you recommend marketers and organizations ask of potential partners to really help them choose the best partner for their individual needs. So either one of you can kind of jump in here.
Caitlin, feel free to
Matt,
start.
you go
Oh, okay.
first. I'll
Okay,
jump
I can
in.
start. No worries. Okay, so from our perspective, when we first meet with a prospect, one of the very first questions that we ask that I think helps set the table for what the prospect should ask, what the marketer should ask. It's always, and Caitlin is the one who came up with this, I believe. It's just, what's the purpose of your website? and what do you want it to do? And what that question does is it requires that marketer and the marketing team to figure out exactly, well, what do I want with my website? And once you have that understanding of what you want the website to do for you, you can start asking all sorts of different questions that can help fill in those gaps. And I was thinking about this question for quite some time, because it's like, what are the questions you want to ask, And so I wrote down a few, and I just thought they kind of fit what typically I'm not asked by marketers that I wish they would. So let me say it that way. So one of the questions was like, what makes your approach unique to website development? So why are you different, essentially? And I was asked that question yesterday by a prospect, and I was kind of taken aback by it, because I'm never asked that. And that really got me to think about, well, we do things differently. We've been doing it for a long time, and that sort of thing. So I feel like that's an extremely important question to ask, because there's so many different developers out there that can do the same thing, but what makes them unique? And that can help you decide on them. Another area, and Katelyn will probably talk about this a little bit, is just like, how do you approach user experience? Because that is such an important thing, because that truly is what defines the purpose of your site. That experience that the user has will define that purpose, and ultimately make the return on the investment that you're trying to do with your website. So really, what's the purpose of, or what is the approach to UX, things like that. And then one of the other big questions that is never asked is like, how easy is it to like scale or modify your website in the future? And what often happens is everyone just focuses on the look and feel, and they get this beautiful website, and then it's handed to them, and they have no idea how to maintain it or how to add content to it or anything. And so it's really important at the start of the entire process to truly understand what you're getting yourself into, and is it something that can, be maintained over time. And it's just, there's all these little other questions that I came up with that help define that, but I feel like those are kind of the summarizing questions that are extremely helpful. It's just, what makes you unique? How do you approach user experience? And really, what can I do in the future? I think is, for me, the overall questions I think a marketer should ask a vendor.
Yeah, I think that is perfectly in line with what I was going to say too, is that I think, when we talk to people about websites, and even when we get things like RFPs going out about, what someone wants from someone to build their site, they're always very focused on the look and the technical side. And so it's a lot of like, can you build a site that functions this way? And I think that that's where, man, I think that's like the perfect distinction of like, a lot of people, if not most website vendors, can build a basic website that can function, with maybe the exception of a couple pieces of functionality that are unique. Anyone can build a site that does probably technically what you need it to do. I think the bigger questions that people aren't asking about are those more general questions of, what is your approach to user experience? And also, I think, Matt, you're completely right. Asking questions within themselves as well, I think, is one of the biggest ways to get started. I think oftentimes when we have those questions of like, what is the purpose of your site? What do you want someone to do when they come to your website? What's the next step? What does someone know about you beforehand? Or like, where's the website in your overall marketing process? Oftentimes when we ask those questions, they even ask those questions to themselves. And so it's almost like, even more so than just asking us questions, I think there's a pre-step to this, is like making sure that you're talking internally with all of the different players that are somehow involved in the site, to make sure that you have an understanding of what type of website you actually want to build. Because like I said, anyone can build a site that technically works, but in order to build a good website, you need to know the answers to those questions, so that you know what you are basically tasking the website vendor with in terms of content, in terms of experience, in terms of the data that they need to gather. They're not going to be able to do that for you. We're not going to be able to do that for you if you don't know those questions yourself going into the project.
We got a nickel for every time a marketer said, well, we want a website, but we're not really sure what content to add to it. It's like, I don't even know what to write about. And it's like, Okay, well, do you have a purpose? Like, let's go back to the basics here and figure
Yeah.
that out. And yeah, we'd be very wealthy people if we got a nickel every time we heard that. So
Yeah, I love that idea of the pre-step of talking internally amongst your team and just making sure that you all have an internal understanding of what you want and need from your site before you even go out to start looking at vendors. So, and we do have a great of episodes of Around the Campfire focused on developing a really good website RFP. So check that out because it kind of walks you through all of the steps and kind of helps you think through internally, like Katelyn and Matt are suggesting, before you even get to the point of going out to RFP. So definitely check out those episodes because they're really helpful. So great advice. Matt, this question is for you because I know you get this quite often, which is we get a lot of questions from potential clients and existing clients, what's a reasonable budget for a website design and development project or a redesign? And I think sometimes people can be surprised at the fact that we can't just say off the cuff, well, it's going to be X amount of dollars, but then they are often surprised at how much websites do cost, particularly because I think a lot of people think now of, kind of do it yourself type website tools like Wix and Squarespace and others that are just very readily available. And so the price tag can be a little bit of a shock to do a website really, really well. So how do you typically answer that question when someone asks you, well, what should my website cost? So,
well, you touched on the one thing about like the DIY tools that are out there. They're great. They're really cool. They work really well. The problem is they're really good for smaller implementations or for like, oh, Katelyn is going to start writing a blog about Dungeons and Dragons and she's going to have this huge, website about it and stuff like that. Or I'm going to do one on Batman or whatever. So those tools are really good. They promote themselves as being like these great business tools. And I still think they're not mature enough to really achieve that, where a marketer can just sign up for a monthly fee and be able to create something just out of the box with, oh, it comes with AI and all this stuff. I can create this great website, no problem. It just doesn't exist yet. Ask me that question in 5 years and think the answer might be completely different, right? Just with all the trends that are happening with AI and how tools are working. But really, I think the one thing I can say concretely, I can't say the word concretely, the cheapest option is rarely the best. So you get what you pay for. And if you interview, say, 3 or 4 vendors, and you've got one that's really low cost and one that's really high cost, you really want to figure out, okay, what is the scope of work that they're proposing to understand what you're getting for what you're paying for? Because what I've come across with other marketers who have gone with a cheaper route, they come back to us, and not that we're the most expensive, but we just weren't the cheapest. They come back to us and they explain like, well, they didn't do all the things that you guys said you were going to do. So can you finish it for us? And so there's really no rule of thumb other than you get what you pay for. A few years ago, I would say like a really small website would be like from $1,000 to $5,000. And then you go up from there where, large businesses are, they're spending, 50,000 plus on the website, especially if they have a catalog. That starting point has definitely gone up some. And I would say like a base website, if you are a business, maybe not a sole entrepreneur type of business. I mean, like a business with like 10 people or something along those lines. $10,000 is not out of the frame when it comes to building a website now, just because of all the things you want to incorporate. And that's just building the website. There's a lot of other components that you might want to incorporate into all of it, like a strategy, like user experience strategy, website strategy, SEO, all of those things. And that just adds on to that pricing. So I think the important thing to think about is just when you're reaching out to other vendors, if you've got price ranges that vary all over, try to compare apples to apples, because that can get you in trouble if you don't. So yeah, there's no real good like, oh, every website costs this, unfortunately.
right.
Yeah, and the one thing I'd add on too, and Matt, you kind of said this too, is that, the less you pay, likely also the more you're gonna have to do yourself. So like we see this a lot with
It's a
content
very good point.
development. So, it obviously, if you wanted a vendor to say write content for you for your website, if you don't have content for your website or edit your content to make it optimized for SEO, obviously that takes additional budget. But keep in mind, if you don't have content for your website, well, someone's got to write that. So you're also taking time away from your staff to write that as well if you don't pay a vendor to do it. So it's sort of a balancing act of like, what are you comfortable taking on in-house and spending the time and effort to do in-house versus where is the balance of it actually makes more sense to just pay a vendor to do this to save our team time, even though it might cost a little bit more monetarily. So we run into that a lot as well.
So would you guys say that content is kind of the number one thing that marketers need to think about before, as they're choosing a new partner? Or would you say UX is the most important thing? Is there one thing that you can point to say, this is really the one thing that you need to talk to a potential vendor about that's really going to make or break your project? And I know it's hard to pinpoint one thing because there are lots of different aspects, but can you pinpoint one thing?
I would actually say it's less of a task and more of a mindset to look for. So, like something, I think Matt and I have had conversations about this with certain projects of that. Sure, you need someone who can, talk to you about all the different pieces. But one thing I think we try and do a lot is we're going to be honest with you no matter what. And so, I think finding someone who is willing to tell you if what your idea is a smart idea or a not so smart idea, and having someone who's willing to be honest with you, I think is and have that transparency and communication is so important and finding someone that you can trust to give you that advice. So it's kind of a two-way street there because I think all of it's important. I think user experience, obviously I'm a little biased, is incredibly important. Content's important because if you don't have content, your site can't launch. But also you need a site that's built correctly. And you need to be able to trust your vendor to build a site that's technically sound. So it's like you need to really find someone that you can trust and also someone that's going to be honest with you and give you honest thoughts on, oh, you say you want to add, 10 pages of content to that page. Not someone who's just going to say yes and build the page for you. Someone who's going to say, that's actually not a great user experience. Here's what I would recommend and how I would recommend approaching that as well. So that would be my opinion of what makes kind of like how you find someone that's a good partner in that is someone who's going to be transparent with you throughout that process.
Yeah, my head went right there too, Katelyn. You're spending, a website project is not like, oh, in 2 weeks it's done. It can be anywhere from like a 3-month to a year-long project, depending on the scale of the work. And so you really want to look for a partner who's acting more like a strategic consultant than just like a transactional vendor. So just like what Katelyn was saying. And then the other thing that I guess I don't always say this, but something that I think about a lot is like, do I have the right chemistry with this marketer? And sometimes you have great chemistry and you can crank out work and it just hums along like a, well-oiled machine. And then there's other times where you just can't. And it's just because the chemistry isn't there. So definitely as a marketer, when you're reaching out and talking to vendors, just really trust your instincts on how you feel about the communication and the chemistry with that vendor, because you're going to spend 3, 4, 5 or more months with them working on a very stressful project. And so you really want to find that person that you can get along with, you trust them, just like Katelyn says, and they trust you as well.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Can you guys talk a little bit about, post-launch support too, and what you should be looking for from a vendor in that regard? Because I think a lot of times marketers, we get caught up in the actual like sexy elements of website, the design and what it looks like and the color selection and all of that and the cool functionality. And we're like, and then we focus on the launch. And I think sometimes we focus far less on what happens after that launch. So what is some advice that you have for marketers looking for a partner in terms of what they should be thinking about or asking that vendor about related to, after launch support?
I'll jump on this one. One of the questions I had mentioned at the beginning was like, how can you scale or modify your website in the future? To me, that is one of the biggest things, because more often than not, when somebody comes to me and they've recently launched a new website, or they've inherited a website, what they find is they don't know how to do anything on the site. And that's because the vendor that was used didn't provide any training. And personally, for me, one of the biggest things that we've focused on with our WordPress group is WordPress can be built a million different ways. It's got every plugin you can possibly imagine and everything you can think of. What we've done with our team is create a set of plugins that are really easy to use, but then work really well with each other, but only if you know how to use them. So the biggest thing for us is we have these one-on-one training times with our clients. We've got documentation, and I always have this rule that everyone laughs about. It's the 10-minute rule. And it takes you longer than 10 minutes to figure something out. Just give me a call, because the chances are the solution to what you're trying to do is really simple. You just aren't looking in the right spot. So for me, it's all about the training factor and how you can maintain your site in the future. And a lot of marketers don't think about that because of all the things you've been saying.
The one thing I think that's great, and I think the one thing I'll add on from kind of the other user experience and marketing side of things is that, you spend a lot of time building a website focusing on the user experience of it and the SEO, search engine optimization of it at that time, forgetting that over time that's going to degrade. So SEO probably being the quickest one that, Google's changing their algorithm daily, hourly sometimes. And while, you can do the best you can to get it to launch with a solid search engine presence, that's going to change over time based on Google's whims. And if you aren't kind of having someone maintain that over time, you might lose rankings, you might gain rankings, but you sure don't have control of it. So having someone kind of, if that's something that you care a lot about, having someone involved in that process from a vendor side to help you through that could be really helpful. And then similar with user experience, as you add content to your site, as the technology changes and things like that, your user experience is also going to be impacted. So making sure that you're keeping an eye on that as well over time, I think, is really important.
Absolutely. Excellent advice. Is there anything else that you would like to share about that we haven't already touched on that marketers should be thinking about when choosing a partner?
For me, a lot of times marketers, they get this idea that they want to redesign the website, and they don't build the case for it, and then they get frustrated because the executive team or the higher ups, whoever, don't really see the return on that investment. And one of the things that I feel is extremely important for marketers and marketing teams is to understand that a website can have a significant ROI if done properly. And that can be something that you can leverage to get that buy-in from, the C-suite of your company, and to treat the project as like almost a product that you would be selling. And if we build this, what do we get out of doing all of this work? And by thinking in those terms, you're going to have more buy-in from your executive team. You're going to have more buy-in from your other stakeholders because they can see the vision. And I think it'll just help you overall with the vendor as well, because you've got that figured out. It all goes back to what's the purpose of your site, and using that as your baseline for moving forward with everything. And I think that is something that marketers don't think about quite often when they're going into this project. It's more of like, I just don't like the look of this site, or it just doesn't.
Yeah.
So much more to it that it'll make you look like a rock star, right? If you build a website and you have just this huge return on new leads and new business coming in through the website, like everyone's gonna love it, and you're gonna be the rock star of the company. So there's a lot of benefits both personally and professionally.
And the one thing I'd build on with that, which my kind of one point is very similar, kind of going back to the purpose of the site and making sure that you know that going into this project, is that oftentimes when we're talking to people about their new sites and what they want to do with their sites, it's a lot of what they want as a business. And maybe I'm a little bit biased as the user experience person, but I think always making sure that you're also thinking about what your users need from you. Because really, if you think about it at the end of the day, while it's your business's website, it's not really for your business, it's for your customers. So they're the ones coming to the site. They're the ones who need to be able to do what they need to do in order to see that return on ROI and in order to, become the rock star that Matt was just talking about. So I think that's just another thing to think about when you're talking about building a website is not just, oh, we need this division needs this or this team needs to make sure this is on the site. It's okay, well, what do the people coming to our site need from us and can they do it now? Now, part of that can come through a user experience strategy and talking to users and all that stuff too, but just making sure that you're in that mindset from the very beginning, because your site isn't going to be successful at the end of this project if you aren't meeting the needs of the users coming to it. So I think that's just another way to make sure that you're thinking about your redesign the right way and making sure that you find a partner who also is thinking about the site the right way and is thinking about what the users need throughout that process as well.
Yes, excellent. I love how you guys tied that all up with just a nice little bow. That was perfect. Well, thank you both so much for joining me and sharing these excellent tips and insights to help marketers choose the best website design and development partner. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. If you would like to catch up on previous episodes of Around the Campfire, you can visit our podcast playlist on YouTube or visit our website at nwsdigital.com/around the campfire. So thank you again for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you around the campfire again very soon. Take care.
Thank you.